Today we bring you an underrated apocalyptic zombie film, World Ends at Camp Z. The end of the world arrives as a mysterious flu quietly spreads across the globe. At first, everyone thought it was just a severe flu outbreak. But as things escalated, the authorities realized they had to take action to cut off the transmission routes. At this moment, the entire state of New Jersey is reminding citizens through radio, television, and the internet to take proper protective measures.
Doctors are urging that the safest thing for everyone to do for themselves and their loved ones is to stay inside and isolate. This is a highly infectious virus and is spreading quicker than the WHO is able to provide updates and recommendations. If you absolutely need to go out, please wear full PPE. There is no other way to avoid this contagion.
This woman is Vanessa, a professional lawyer. The man speaking with her is Julian, the caretaker of this now closed large camping site, where he has lived since birth. This camp was bought by his uncle and a business partner 20 years ago, but due to financial issues at the bank, they were forced to sell this fertile land. Vanessa is the lawyer hired by the buyer, who is coming tomorrow to sign the contract and enjoy a vacation here. This makes Julian, who sees the camp as his home, feel very uneasy, not because he can't accept reality, but because he fears the new owner will change the camp's natural look. In the end, at the request of the other partner, Clay, Julian has no choice but to cooperate with Vanessa on everything moving forward. After spending a day together, Julian finds that this woman isn't so bad after all. Vanessa also assures him that the next owner will definitely take good care of the camp. Clay is a Native American from the local tribe, and he tells Vanessa a story he personally experienced a few years ago. At that time, a hunting expedition had hired Clay as their guide, and for a few days, everything went smoothly. On the final night, a group of young people partied excitedly all night long, but when Clay woke up the next morning, all the gear and luggage were still there, yet the people had vanished. Fearing they had gotten lost during the celebration, he immediately called the police and requested a search team. They searched for 3 days straight but found no trace of the missing group. Just as everyone was about to head back, they discovered fresh human remains, bloody with meat and bones, as if they had been bitten alive and torn apart. Through the torn clothing, Clay confirmed that these remains belonged to the missing expedition team. Since then, many strange rumors started to spread. Some claimed to have seen odd creatures in the forest, some with 2 legs, others with 4. But all the witnesses agreed on one thing: the creature had glowing, shiny eyes. Although Clay had never seen one himself, his Algonquin tribe had an ancient legend about monsters roaming the woods, which they called Wendigos. They were said to be half-human, half-ghost beings, known for their bloodthirsty cruelty. Even though Julian strongly dismissed these legends, Vanessa still felt deeply disturbed. The next morning, Julian planned to drive into town to buy some supplies, but he found that his pickup truck had broken down. Just then, Vanessa showed up and kindly offered him a ride, and Julian happily accepted. What surprised him even more was that Vanessa asked him to drive, which made Julian incredibly happy. He had never driven such a nice car in his entire life, and this seemingly casual gesture instantly brought them closer. Meanwhile, the town was buzzing with excitement, with people lining the streets, singing praise and cheering.
The provincial government is on the verge of adopting martial law after hundreds of young people have become infected. They feel it's the only way to control its population due to the pandemic deniers. As was stated earlier this week, the federal government has allowed each province to govern the handling of their own jurisdictions.
That afternoon, the actual buyer of the camp arrived with a group of rich friends. His name was Aaron, a wealthy young heir. The stark difference in status gave Julian a strong sense of disparity, but he had long since gotten used to it. What he didn't expect, however, was that Vanessa turned out to be Aaron's girlfriend, which stirred a pang of jealousy in Julian's heart. Just then, a shout in his ear snapped him out of it. The man speaking was Nate, who casually pulled out a tip and asked Julian to load everyone's luggage into the car. But just as Julian reached out to grab the suitcase, Andrea stepped in and stopped him. Seeing this unfold, Aaron said nothing at all. After settling everyone in, Julian was about to leave when he was called back, this time by Aaron. They asked Julian to prepare food, but that wasn't part of his job. Next, Nate stepped in again. In his view, there's no problem in the world that money can't solve. And if there is, it just means you didn't pay enough. Although Julian felt deeply insulted, he also knew that while money isn't everything, it was something he desperately needed. Soon after, under Julian's lead, Aaron met Clay. But Clay didn't like the man in front of him. In fact, he despised his entire family. Clay knew very well about Aaron's father and what their company had done, and if he had any other choice, he would never sell the camp to someone like him. Originally, the person who was supposed to sign the contract with Aaron was Julian's uncle, but he never showed up, forcing Aaron to negotiate with this stern man instead. Clay had only one request, that the land remain unchanged after the purchase, which left Aaron speechless, and the meeting ended unpleasantly. Not long after, Aaron and Max sneaked off to the lakeside. It turned out there was a massive graphite mine beneath the land, and that was their real reason for buying the property. But Aaron's girlfriend Vanessa had no idea. Thinking themselves clever, the two didn't realize that Clay was watching their every move. That night, they threw a wild party, and Julian ended up being their full-time babysitter and cook. After finishing everything, Julian quietly left as he watched the blissful smile on Vanessa's face. He returned alone to the warehouse and tried to fix his old pickup truck. No matter how nice someone else's car is, it'll never be your own. As the engine roared to life, the gloom on Julian's face finally lifted. Elsewhere, Andrea was sitting on Aaron's lap. Vanessa, unable to take it anymore, gently asked Andrea to give her boyfriend back. But Andrea mocked Vanessa, calling her petty and jealous. Andrea and Aaron had known each other since childhood and were from equally wealthy families. Even so, they only ever saw each other as best friends.
Except that night we made out in Rio, remember?
We were 16.
Wow, what a crazy night. We're just trying to anger our dads, but they were so pleased. They're saying all the time that it would be super good for business, you know, if he ever got married. It's crazy.
Late at night, Julian received a call from Vanessa. Their friend Max had gone missing. Julian rushed to meet them, and just then, Aaron found bloodstains on some leaves and pieces of Max's torn clothing. They followed the trail of blood deep into the woods, eventually discovering a small altar. The ground was covered in candles and the remains of small animals, smeared with crimson fluid and shredded flesh. The terrifying scene made Andrea scared, and she giggled as she nestled into Aaron's arms. This melodramatic moment left Vanessa completely speechless. Just then, a shadow darted through the forest, and Julian and the others gave chase, but the figure suddenly turned and charged at Aaron, who fired his gun in a panic. What he didn't expect was that the person behind the mask was actually their missing friend. Max had no visible injuries before, but now with a gunshot wound in his leg, he needed to be taken to a hospital in town. Left with no choice, Julian drove them out, while Nate and Andrea chose to stay at the camp. Nate believed all of this was Clay's doing, and to get revenge, he slashed Clay's tires with a blade. Then he pulled out a weapon, ready to have a chat with Clay. Meanwhile, Julian and the others were stopped as soon as they entered the town. The town was now under lockdown, and no one was allowed in or out. The soldiers advised Julian and the group to turn back immediately. Back at the camp, Nate was threatening Clay with a gun. Seeing Nate's arrogance, Clay couldn't be bothered to explain. He simply raised his hunting rifle. At that moment, Nate was consumed by overwhelming fear, and even the hand holding the gun was trembling uncontrollably. Seeing this, Clay lowered his weapon and slowly walked toward Nate, repeating the words, "Go ahead, shoot me if you dare." In the end, Nate was defeated by Clay's overwhelming presence. But just as Clay was about to return to his room to rest, a beast-like howl echoed from the distance. At the same time, Julian and the others ran into trouble. The soldier who had questioned them was attacked, and when they saw the attacker tearing into him like a wild animal, Julian didn't hesitate to flee. More and more infected appeared, crazed and chasing anything that looked like food. Just when they were about to outrun the horde, Julian's pickup truck broke down again, and the injured Max became the tool they used to buy time. Amid Max's screams, Julian and the others managed to escape. Not long after, they returned to the camp, only to find it had also been attacked. Fortunately, there was only one infected, but the camp was no longer safe, and they had to leave as soon as possible. That's when Clay found out his car was no longer functional. To make matters worse, Vanessa had lost her car keys during their escape. Their only hope now was the warehouse, so Clay decided to let them hide in his trailer while he and Julian went to get the warehouse keys. But among the group, only Vanessa believed Clay's intentions. Everyone else thought he had abandoned them. Urged on by Nate, they rushed toward the roadside sightseeing train. Seeing Vanessa hesitate, Aaron decided to let go, and the panicked Vanessa quickly followed them. But it was just a sightseeing train, and its speed was no match for the infected chasing behind them. The next moment, Vanessa's foot was grabbed by one of the infected, and she kept calling out to Aaron for help, unaware that the man was already frozen in fear. In that life-or-death moment, Vanessa's full potential was unleashed. Although she managed to save herself, more and more infected were closing in. Just then, a series of gunshots rang out. It was Julian and Clay who had gotten the keys and returned to pick them up. Clay was furious at the group's reckless behavior, but now wasn't the time to argue. To ensure everyone could make it out safely, Julian decided to lure the infected away. Seeing this, Vanessa immediately ran after him, and the panicked Aaron followed as well. Not long after, both groups rushed into a building nearly at the same time. But the infected behind them had no intention of letting them go easily. During the struggle, Nate's face was scratched. Fortunately, they managed to barricade the front door. However, on Julian's side, the infected broke through quickly. To make sure Vanessa could survive, Julian stepped up once again. After escaping danger, they finally arrived at the warehouse. Vanessa quickly explained everything to Clay. Although Clay was deeply worried about the boy who was like a son to him, he had no choice now but to trust Julian. At that moment, Aaron discovered the barely breathing Andrea and rushed to her side, while Vanessa stood silently watching. She finally understood why Andrea had always bullied her, and why Aaron never spoke up. Having figured it out, Vanessa didn't bother watching anymore. Meanwhile, Julian was cornered by the infected near the river. Luckily, there was a small boat nearby. That's when he realized, despite being fast and fearless, the infected were terrified of water. The frustration of seeing food they couldn't reach made the infected roar in rage. At the same time, the conditions of the two injured people inside the warehouse were worsening. Nate was holding on better, but the frail Andrea had already lost consciousness. At that moment, a single remark from Clay further ignited the tense atmosphere. He believed the virus had mutated, but Aaron, the well-connected rich kid, still insisted it was just a severe flu. Clay had been investigating the virus for a while and wanted to share his findings with the group, but Aaron didn't want to listen. He was used to controlling everything around him, but today he realized that in the face of death, he was powerless.
Started out as a small controlled experiment to test a new vaccine, which obviously didn't work. In the meantime, the government confiscated the virus, saying they're going to destroy it before it caused serious damage.
Then why the hell is all this happening?
The government kept the virus for themselves as a defense weapon. Put the blame on foreign soil. No one knew how dangerous the virus was, or how fast it could spread.
Just then, the unconscious Andrea suddenly moved. Aaron tried to approach her, but Clay stopped him. The next moment, Andrea's vital signs flatlined. As Vanessa grieved over her death, Andrea's eyes suddenly flew open, and she stood up in a twisted, unnatural way. Andrea had disliked Vanessa even when she was alive, so her first target after death was naturally her. Although Vanessa tried to fight back, she was no match for Andrea. Just as Vanessa was about to become Andrea's next meal, the two men finally stepped in. Meanwhile, Julian had quietly reached the warehouse from outside, only to be blocked by more infected ahead. Inside, the transforming Nate looked at the tightly bound Andrea and didn't want to suffer the same fate, waiting passively for death. So Nate decisively opened the warehouse door. In the next moment, he was seized by several infected. Julian used the opportunity to regroup with the other three and told them what he had discovered about the infected's weakness. Then they all sprinted toward the dock, but the infected behind them were getting closer and closer. To buy them time, Clay chose to stay behind and cover their retreat. Just then, Aaron, in a panic, tripped and fell. To save this arrogant rich kid, Clay was tackled by the infected. Seeing the man who was like a father about to die, Julian rushed to help without hesitation. In the next second, he was slammed to the ground by one of the infected and was nearly devoured. Vanessa tried to go rescue him, but Aaron stopped her. Then, completely out of character, the cowardly man charged forward. With his help, Julian narrowly escaped, but Aaron was once again pinned down by the infected. In the end, Clay's sacrifice changed nothing. Julian knew that if they tried to save Aaron again, they would all die here. They took the small boat and followed the river downstream. That's when Julian discovered he had been bitten by one of the infected. Not long after, they reached a riverbank. Julian didn't want to turn into a bloodthirsty monster, but he didn't have the courage to end his own life. Although the decision was heartbreaking for Vanessa, she understood it was the best option. Julian's life ended in that very moment, and across the world, the same tragedy was unfolding. How much longer can Vanessa survive at the dawn of the apocalypse?